Yeah, I again, absolutely agree. And, you know, it's interesting, too. We find ourselves in a lot of our current debates because of the cultural structures that we have in place. And I just want to hit that again, because I think it's not about good people or bad people. It is the fact that we have these institutional realms that are created, these fiefdoms, these pipelines, these slots for thinking that we get piped into. And then we find ourselves either working at odds with each other or against each other, or having to make decisions that in a rational structure we wouldn't have to make. This kind of a structure you're talking about, basically it's get it done, figure out how to do it. Well, then common sense starts to dictate how quickly and how cheaply can I do this. And oh gosh, the private sector can do a large chunk of this. I'm gonna have more money for exploration if I'm getting my transportation or my supplies or things like that handled by the private sector, because my job, as is in these mandates, says I have to do these things. It doesn't say I have to drive the trucks, build the buildings, handle the supplies, that kind of thing. My job is to do these things, period. And then everything else trickles down from that. And what is interesting is, even though that is a scientific exploration mandate, it is one that automatically, by its structure, helps create it catalyzes settlement by its structure, as opposed to creating a structure that can cause or create a battlefield between a mandate and a settlement, an exploration mandate and a settlement mandate. And yeah, I do see a hand coming up, and why don't we go ahead and you want to do this? Let's toss it on out.
Let me kind of try to spoil this Kodak moment here.
Go ahead.
And because this analogy has been brought up before, Antarctica and all that. And the question I have to ask is the difference between a permanent research base and settlement. Mm-hmm. And kind of we have a permanent presence in the Antarctic, but we don't have settlers there. And so I was just wondering, does one preclude, is there an evolution that we could see here? Or if we set up a certain model, does that tend to preclude the other? And what forethought might we want to put there to make sure that the two can coexist?
Let me answer that, and it's a very important point. What the National Science Foundation does and has a charter to do is have a research base. It is not a settlement. We have no charter to have a settlement. And I predict NASA will never have a charter to have a settlement on the moon or Mars. That is not the business of NASA. Other folks might do settlements, but we won't. We may have a charter to establish a research base, the way we have research bases in Antarctica. And that's a perfectly reasonable thing for NASA to do. I don't think it's a reasonable thing to expect NASA to establish a settlement in the sense of kindergartens and elementary schools and that sort of thing. In Antarctica, it's interesting, the history is that no one is precluded from establishing a settlement. The National Science Foundation is directed only to establish research bases. No one has chosen to try to establish a settlement there. What has followed after government research bases has been tourism. So the history of development in Antarctica is government research bases, permanent government research bases. Well, actually, you can back up. Temporary government-sponsored visits, one-offs, then permanent research bases starting in the International Geophysical Year, and then some 20, 25 years later, tourists, and now permanent tourist bases. There are now bases in Antarctica that are operated purely for tourism. Now, I'm not saying that this is a predictive model of the moon or Mars, but I guess I'm saying two things in response to your question, Bruce. NASA will not and should not, in my view, take on settlement. It should take on a research base. If others want to do settlement, fine. If you looked at the Antarctic model, what followed the government research bases was, in fact, tourism. And at least for my money, that's not a bad prediction of what might follow on the moon, at least.